to get going.
Okay.
All right. So welcome, everyone. It is Jennifer Britton, and it is mid-September, September 20th, actually, almost the start of fall. Want to welcome you to the community call for this fall slash summer, calling it Tricky Issues in Team and Group Coaching, and is pretty typical and has been for the last 12 years. I have a couple people here. We've got Jackie. I'll allow Jackie to say hi if she'd like. No doubt some of you will be joining in today, and more often than not, many of you joining us virtually. So I want to say welcome back. Welcome back to spring, fall, wherever you are. I say spring, fall because I was doing a lot of work this summer, at least Canadian summer, with a terrific group in Australia. And it was just a wonderful reminder of how seasonal our work could be. So I was joining them every Wednesday morning at 6:30 in the morning, our time, as the sun was coming up in beautiful Muskoka. And it was as their day was winding down. So welcome back. I'm Jennifer Britton. You may have met me already through my writing. I'm the author, of course, of Effective Group Coaching and From One to Many, Best Practices for Team and Group Coaching. I love these calls more often than not just to reconnect with people. And again, in today's busy virtual world, some of you do manage to jump on these calls, but I always get such wonderful emails after the fact, people who couldn't make it but take their time to listen in. So today we're going to do a 30-minute call. Jackie, you're here with me this morning, calling in from the West Coast. Want to just acknowledge you're here. We've got some others joining us. So welcome as well to Dagmar, who's just dialed in. Thanks for joining us. Just want to leave a space for any questions. Again, today's topic is really about tricky issues. I'm going to talk through some of the traditional things we might see in group and team coaching. And I want to talk about some of the possible strategies that we can use to not only mitigate, which means to minimize, but even sometimes to avoid them altogether. Now, because we work with people and because it's more than one person in the room, it's likely we're going to experience some tricky issues. So I want to take you through some of the main terrain, and then we'll look also at some of the types of personalities which can show up in your room or on your phone. So that's my stake in this work. Want to welcome, many of you are just dialing in, so hi, welcome to you as you join us. We're just getting started. Great to have you here. Would anyone like to say good morning, good afternoon, good evening? And with that, you can also share any questions that you've come with to the call. Any takers on saying hi? And you don't have to.
Hello.
Hello. And that's Darcy. Hello, Darcy. Where are you calling in from today?
Oh, I'm in Oakville.
In Oakville, just down the road. Fantastic. And anyone else would like to say hello?
Hi, I'm using this software for the first time. So can you hear me?
We can hear you 10 out of 10. That's great. Where are you calling in from today?
In Dallas, Texas.
Fantastic. So welcome from Dallas. Jackie, would you like to say hello from the West Coast?
Hi, everybody. I'm Jackie from Vancouver.
Great to have you as well. So we probably will be joined by more people. I've had a number of our SVPs. As is typical in today's virtual world, you can come and attend and sort of get the immediate info. Does anyone have questions about tricky issues as it relates to group and team coaching? And I'm going to be happy to weave these in as we go through our call today. Anyone at all? All right, silence is golden. If you have questions as we go, I can see you can choose to not stream. And again, if you're new to Zoom, it's a wonderful platform. When I'm doing group or team coaching and we're virtual, we're actually not in this format. I don't want to show you the format, but there's a way to not screen share, but sort of have us up as a Hollywood Squares option where we are streaming and we can see each other eyeball to eyeball. But it's a really nice way, again, especially if you're working with a virtual global group or even millennials or people who spend a lot of time virtually, to have the options of the eyeball to eyeball plus some visuals. So here's my agenda. You know, at the end of the day, we can experience tricky issues. It's inevitable. We're working with people. We're working with more than one person. At the end of the day, everything that I say, we are also someone's difficult issue or a difficult participant or tricky issue. And so much of our work, it's through the lens of relationships. So really want to put this in context that everything I say today, we need to look through the lens of the type of people we work through through their eyes and our own style eyes. Ultimately, at the end of the day, when we're working with groups and teams, I think tricky issues emerge for a number of factors. People may not feel heard. They may not feel valued. They may not feel connected with others in the room. They may also not feel psychologically safe or even physically safe. And they may not have high levels of trust. I'm going to leave these up here for a little bit. And again, I will be uploading these slides to the FromOneToMany.com website. If you haven't visited that before, it's simply from2many.com. And when you go over there, you'll see a whole resources page. Feel free to visit some of our past calls. We went to Zoom probably about 2 years ago with this platform. Before that, we have some audio calls as well that are available going all the way back to 2010 and even before that. So ultimately, like, I think we want to look at how do we set people up for success? That's the term that I like to use, so that really we start, even before we get in the room or get on the phone, we start with a place where people are feeling connected. Some of you may know through my writing how much importance I put on doing a pre-call one-on-one, whether it's a corporate program or whether it's a program I'm running within the public. I really put a lot of weight on getting people to meet me. We may do it by phone, we may do it in person, but I want to make sure that we have a bit of a connection. And I also want to use that call to make sure that this program or the program they're joining is the best fit for them at this time. If it's coaching, do they understand what coaching is? Do they understand that they're going to be driving the bus in the coaching relationship? So these are a few things that we can really do. Interestingly enough, there's been some research that's come out this year that has pointed to this issue of psychological safety. So some of you may be aware of Charles Duhigg. He was the author of The Power of Habit, I think was his first book. His second book came out this year called Smarter, Better, Faster, I think is the term. But it's Charles Duhigg, D-U-H-I-G-G. And in February of this year, 2016, he published a wonderful article in the New York Times. It was actually an excerpt from part of his book, but in it he talks about Google's experience in creating high-performing teams. And Google, for a couple of years now, have been studying what makes teams excel. And in fact, this issue of psychological safety and also having shared behavioral norms were some of the elements that Google found helped their project teams excel. So I think as coaches, that's not surprising. If any of you read my book, either book really, I continue to talk about the importance in our work of helping teams and groups articulate their norms. Who are you? How do you want to be? What does a value such as respect mean for you as a team behaviorally? As a team, we can say, yeah, customer service is important, but really, what are the behaviors behind that? So not to go too far, we're here for tricky issues, but just to put this in the frame of like where research is going right now, I think it's quite interesting that we're seeing a resurgence of the importance of that physiological and psychological safety. For any of you working in Canada, you may be aware of the different provincial acts, the different series of legislations that actually require for us as trainers, as facilitators, in ensuring that psychologically safe environment, especially when we're working with more than one person. So I think the question becomes, what are those types of tricky issues? If it's because people don't feel safe, what are some of the things that might show up? And these are just some of them here, again, in no order. Coachability, there's a lot that's been written in years gone by around coachability, not only in the one-on-one vein, but I'm hoping that one day someone will look at coachability and team and group coaching. Ultimately, we want to make sure that coaching is the right fit for the people that we're working with. So assessments, just want to throw this out. Some of you may use current assessments to look at coachability. I think certain organizational programs have great assessments for one-on-one work, whether the person is more geared to counseling or coaching. I just wanted to open it up to the community to see if any of you use an assessment specific for coachability for group and team coaching issues. And I'll just leave that hanging. We've got quite a few people now on. So welcome to all of you. We've got people calling in from offices. And does anyone currently use different pre-assessments to check for coachability? Okay, so obviously an area.
I do. I do.
Yeah, so go ahead. Who is that speaking if you want to give us your name?
This is Dagmar.
All right, Dagmar. So what do you do currently in your work?
I'm a success coach. I help people understand and overcome their limiting beliefs by healing the emotional traumas and childhood wounds, essentially. So I provide a pre-assessment form prior to even the introductory consultation. And that's to understand what the two issues of the person are and understand where they want to go next.
Fantastic. So as you start up your work, is this with groups or do you do a pre-assessment with them then?
With the groups, it's trickier because I recruit at workshops that I conduct, which are already in a group setting. I recruit at introductory live events, so I do have interaction with the people that will be to my group program. So I am familiar with them. So there's no need to do the pre-assessment per se.
Yes. And again, a pre-assessment can be as simple as if you're jumping down on a screen of pre-calls, right? That is, for me, in my work, I really value the high touch, the connection early on, whether we meet on Zoom, whether we meet by phone. Sometimes if they're in the Toronto area, I'll get to meet people in person. But it's just, making yourself available. And I think we often feel like, oh, the organization won't go for it, or that's going to cost too much money. Really, if you're doing organizational work, I think people value those 15-minute pre-calls. I did a series recently where I went in, it's for not a coaching engagement, but a departmental-wide initiative. And spent the day meeting over 20 people. And while it was very, very full, it was just wonderful to start that dialogue. And so when we're back together in a few weeks, we're really going to be able to start the conversation at a very different level. It helps me as a coach. It helps them feel more connected. So it can take some time. My experience has been, and you may have heard me say this before, but in my 12 and a half, almost 13 years now of being a coach under my own umbrella, the handful of refunds that I've done around group coaching have always been, and there's been less than 6, it's always been with people who have not had time, quote unquote, for a pre-call one-on-one. And as those people have come onto a first call, it's been very apparent we don't have the same shared expectations. They're not really, again, it's not a right fit for them. So fit issues we continue to see across coaching is such an important area. We want to make sure that we are co-creating agreements, creating shared ways of working, whether we're working with a group or a team. And again, these conversations start before you're in the room. Even if you're working with a team, you may not be wanting to do pre-calls with each person because you're holding that team as a system, but send them an email. Let them know what they can expect. Send everyone an email in terms of, what the work may entail, sort of who you are, your expectations, even before you get in the room. And a whole other area, and we'll touch on this very lightly, but technology in and of itself can be a whole tricky issue bucket. I'm excited, we have a couple of people here on today's call. It's their first time on Zoom. I want to just show you a couple of options. I should have mentioned this early on, but there is a mute function for you, depending on whether you're calling in on an iPad, an Android, mobile. You should see when you hover either at the top bar or the bottom left, a sort of a series of options for you. There should be a mute button, which usually looks like a microphone. You can click on that. If you don't want your video running, you can also stop your video. Obviously, in group coaching, I want to leave microphones open. I want to have us stream. Not everyone can stream, but the nice thing about Zoom is it's a very stable platform. I've been using it for a couple of years now. Until last Friday, I had never had a call drop. And for the first time ever, after probably thousands of hours or hundreds of hours at least on Zoom, a call dropped, but it was very easy for us to get back on. depending on whatever technology you're using, know it, use it, practice it with your friends, have a backup, and have a backup that's a little bit different. If you have either one of my books, I go more into sort of the virtual learning area in both books. It's a passion area of mine. I continue to do so much in this area. And don't be surprised if you'll see another resource coming out from me soon on virtual facilitation, because it really is sort of this next wave of creating excellent conversation spaces.
And what's the name of your book?
So my first two books, Effective Group Coaching, and the second book that came out in 2013 is From One to Many, Best Practices for Team and Group Coaching. So I don't have copies here with me now, but if you scroll back, I'll just scroll back. I'll see if I can go back to the front. You just copies of the book, Effective Group Coaching, and From One to Many, Best Practices for Team and Group Coaching. A couple of people on the call have used the book. I don't want to do a plug, but if anyone's had a good experience, as we go to wrap up the call, you can share your experience with one or both books. They're now being used by coach training schools all over the world. Very practical primers on how to do this work. That was the intent when I wrote them both. You can get them at Amazon. I have a few copies left. I only have 6 copies left of From One to Many here at my office. I have about 11 left of Effective Group Coaching. So if you're interested, reach out to me, groupcoachingessentials.com or info@potentialsrealized.com. And I'll have those at the end of our slides. So again, want to keep us moving. A couple of other things just to notice and watch for: people not finding it valuable, quote unquote. And this may happen in more mandated programs when people are mandated to come to coaching. Again, this is where I think pre-calls become even more important. And you may be very explicit in saying, listen, I know that you've been told that you need to come to coaching. How do we make this a valuable experience for you? What are your goals? How would you like support? So those are 3 sets of questions. Again, I would not be asking them in one breath. I would be separating that out, but in a 10 to 15 minute pre-call, I'd really want to start building that relationship with the new group coaching client and really find out from them what's going to make this valuable. And when I am working with groups that are mandated and may not find it valuable, I'm very upfront in saying, listen, I know that you may not have signed up for this by choice, but how do we really make this a rich learning experience for you? And that's a nice doorway into creating some shared group agreements, or as I might term it, ways of working. Another area where people may not find it valuable is perhaps because there's too much diversity in the room. It could be diverse styles or diverse focus areas. And over the last decade plus, again, I've been in business since 2004 under my own umbrella. Even before that, what I was finding in my former world of work when I was a leader with the UN, the United Nations, I was doing a lot of team development and group development as well. That's been my background for the last 30 years. We have to always remember that as you add more bodies into a room or onto a team, we have that exponential effect. It's not just adding one person, it's adding one person plus their assumptions, their values, their perspectives, etc. So if you're finding that people aren't finding things valuable, you'll want to really get curious with them. What do we need to change? And if you're running programs multiple times, maybe your numbers need to come down. Maybe people aren't feeling as connected as they would like to with other people. Or maybe there is too much diversity in the room. I know of coaches who are, their world is very successful in saying, hey, I'm going to run a group coaching program for business owners. And that's the big, big, big umbrella. I found over the years I've had to be even more specific than that in offering public programs so that people are coming on a similar wavelength. They're not coming on the same wavelength, but they're coming with similar purpose and agenda and focus. That too, numbers, etc., helps us with, people who are not feeling connected with others. Again, remember to really step into a coaching conversation, which is at that deeper level. We need to have high levels of trust. We need to have high levels of connection. And that doesn't necessarily form overnight. So notice in your first or even second group or team coaching conversations, whether it's in person or by phone or by Zoom, a lot of it may be more focused on process and or focused on structures to help people get to know each other. I often get a lot of questions from new coaches to group and team coaching, especially for groups. And people ask, well, should I do pairs? Can we have conversations flowing in between the main group calls? I think for groups, absolutely. If that's, appropriate for the context that you're working within. It's pretty, commonplace now, especially with budgets, that instead of doing like a couple calls a month, you may have to be doing only one call every 3 to 4 weeks. What happens when our time frames elongate is all of a sudden people are feeling less connected. So something we can do with lower budget for groups is we can create these paired learning partners. I was saying to someone early today, if you are doing pairs or triads, dyads or triads in between your main group calls, you may want to give them a prompting question or, a powerful question that can launch their conversation together during those midpoint or mid-month meetings. Not everything has to happen in a large group, but again, you are at choice. You as the coach, you along with your group and or team will need to decide how do you want to structure all of these programmatic pieces. It changes the flavor of the program. So a couple, just to summarize some of these like mitigation factors things, and mitigation is a very old term. I used to do a lot of work with the UN in disaster management. So I would be part of teams that would really look at what you do to rebuild a capital when a hurricane has decimated it or a volcano has blown it up. And in disaster management, we talk about mitigation. What can you do to lower the risk? It doesn't mean that the risk isn't there, but what do you do to lower the risk? And I think that's something in team and group coaching we always want to keep in mind. What do we do to be proactive so that we really set people up for success? And if issues do emerge, we're able to really move with them through solid relationships, through conversation, and higher levels of trust. So they may not go away, but they may be at a lesser level. So again, you've heard me say multiple times in the last 20 minutes, pre-calls, connecting people with each other, using different approaches. And, again, if you listen in to some of the past calls that I've done, you can access those at FromOneToMany.com. You'll hear me talk about very different ways we can be coaching groups and teams. All of this will be structured and really, geared by our clients. So we need to meet people where they're at. And as coaches, I think it's really important that we continue to co-create. Not only that shouldn't be shared exercises, I think it should be shared expectations. So, creating that shared expectations is so important in the work that we do. And part of that creating shared expectations is finding out from each group member, what are your goals? What is going to make our time in this coaching environment really valuable? What are the goals for the current session? And what are the goals for the longer term of our work together? For those of you that are doing team coaching, you're going to be working with goals probably at the collective team level. And if you are not coaching the team as a system, you may have underneath embedded individual coaching goals for each team member. Again, this is where in team coaching, our work can look very different depending on if we're coaching the team as a system, as an entire entity, or if we're looking to grow the team members to strengthen the team in and of itself. And again, past calls that I've done gets a little bit more at those nuances. Any questions on these mitigation factors? I want to just take just a nanosecond for any questions, points of clarification, anything at all, big or small? Okay, so different personalities, whether we call them difficult participants, or I've had recently, I've used this cartoon, I had this cartoon done by a wonderful cartoonist, Ravensfeller, a couple of years ago. And last year I was doing a lot of coaching skills training with healthcare leaders. And one of the healthcare leaders said, you know what, I think, Jen, you should really rename this from difficult participants to team members. I have one of these team members in my team right now. And I think really that was the impetus. For many, many years, for a decade and a half, I was a virtual team leader. And I would have these personalities show up on my team, whether they were sitting in a cubicle beside me or whether, because I was a sub-regional manager, I'd be out seeing them every 3 to 6 months. So there is a number of strategies to work with these types of personalities. Each one of us will find a different type of person difficult. For some of us, it may be the challenger, the person who's so confrontational. For others, it might be working, with the know-it-all, the person who just knows everything or should really be at the front of the room with you. I, in my travels of the last 3 decades of facilitating, training, leading, coaching, have met people like this all the time. And again, we want to go back to why are some of those behaviors showing up? Is this person feeling like they've been heard? Again, for a know-it-all, for a challenger, they may feel that their voice is not being heard. Many moons ago, I was doing some internal consulting work for one of my employers, and I was tasked to work with an external consultant, taking a group of about 30 people through a 3-week onboarding program. There was one person in the room who day one showed up as the know-it-all, and they drove the external consultant crazy by the end of day 2. He was ready to pull out his hair, and he said, Jen, what are we going to do? I said, listen, let's give this person flip charting ability. My handwriting is not great. Let's get them to do the flip charting. And as soon as we gave that person that responsibility, it was like a ray of sunshine showed up. They were so helpful. They were seen, they were heard, they felt valuable. And instead of like inserting themselves in every conversation, they were happy to be seen at the front of the room in their flip charting duties. So I think that's just a very quick example of how we want to get creative. Again, thinking about how do we set people up for success. All of these types of personalities, these things, a sidebar conversation, it can be so annoying in the room. And as the group coach / leader / facilitator, we have a responsibility to maintain that positive learning environment. So I go into more detail around some of these personality types and strategies you can use in an article that I wrote and was posted last year at the Coaching Tools website. So coachingtools.com, some of you may know Emma Louise Elsie. I write about 4 articles a year, and I did one last year on difficult participants and how to approach them. When I go to post this recording, I'll include a link to that article, but it's at the coachingtools.com website. You should be able to see that, and it goes into much greater depth. Again, I'm skirting the surface here. We could do a whole other call, and maybe I'll do another call in 2017 around really working and supporting these types of personalities. Again, in interest of time, we've got about 5 minutes left of this call. Just want to check in with all of you. Is there one type of person here where you're scratching your head and you're wondering, if this type of person showed up in my room or on my Zoom room, what would I do? Happy to go into some possible techniques. So anyone at all?
If I can speak, my challenge has been, I've had a few participants who, I guess they would be the know-it-all, but they were not actively participating necessarily or interrupting the flow. At the end of the workshop, I've heard a few times, I didn't get anything out of it.
Yes.
Stated wildly. And surprisingly, a month later, sometimes 2 months, these people will come back and say, this was the most transforming workshop ever. And they will go into a half-an-hour testimonial on how their life has changed. Mm-hmm. So I guess my question is, I know that the transformation that I offer has a time delay factor. So these things, I don't take them personally.
Yes.
I understand that they haven't been able to absorb the change in their perspective. Mm-hmm. But when they make these kind of statements publicly, it's not my job to tell them otherwise. Yes. So I remain silent. But is there a way of responding to it so it doesn't look like, maybe to others, it does not undermine what's happening at the workshop?
Mm-hmm. A great example. And sometimes you'll have the comments as a sidebar, right? Like they won't say it directly to you, but you'll hear it as people are walking out of the room. Again, I really sort of like to, it goes back to shared expectations. This is your fora. how are we going to make this most valuable? At the start of any day, even if it's a workshop, I'll say, what do you want to get out of our process today? And usually at lunchtime, I'll do a check-in. Okay, let's take a look back at this morning. I'm going to go around the room and I want to hear from everyone. What's one thing that's either been reinforced or you found valuable as a new idea, so that we're not leaving it to the end of the day. I also say very upfront and frankly, especially in workshop settings, now's the time also to let me know, what do we need to add or change? And I continue to hear from corporate clients, especially, they love that flexibility factor. It now becomes something that's their own. So again, just as you said, Dagmar, very important that we don't become defensive, that we're open to this feedback. I'm there to serve different groups, and every group that I work with is going to be so dramatically different. So leaving space for people to pause and also think about it. Again, I sort of usually will go to the verbal channel of what, share with each other what you found valuable. There are groups that may be more introverted that find that incredibly painful. And so if I'm working with more of an introverted group, I may get them to write it down and turn to their neighbor before we go to break instead of articulating it to the larger group. So we have all different styles in the room, and we just want to create multiple opportunities. So we'll do a sort of a pulse check at lunch. I'll also do one towards the end of the day and then at the end of the day. And because Dagmar, that your work is really planting the seeds for those deeper changes over time, I'm sure you do it already, but just reinforce that, reinforce that today is the start of a process. There'll be things we're exploring that really will become more important or more apparent as we get it into action, as you get it into action. I think the power of coaching is a change process. It takes time. That's why we meet with clients multiple touch points. Even when I'm training, I'll offer up as an option. And again, sometimes there's pricing attached to this, but I'll offer up a follow-on call, a month after with teams, for example, that I might have done a team day. They don't want a full-blown team coaching session, but they just want a team day. I'll be very upfront and saying, this is great. I've done it for 30 years. And what usually happens is the results are left at the retreat site. How about I meet back with your team in a month for a quick 1-hour call? We can reconnect and talk about what you've been doing, what you've been actioning, what you're taking forward. And in fact, that becomes a great source of feedback, more medium term. It becomes an accountability marker for the team. And more importantly, it becomes that relationship builder for me with the team. I had a team come back to me this year that I'd worked with about 18 months ago. And the thing that stood out for them wasn't what we did in the room. It was the conversation we had afterwards in that 1-hour call, where we weren't even calling in from the same room. The team was national and they were calling in from all over. But what they've remembered in the last 18 months was the power of the 1-hour call, not the power of the one day, which is fascinating to me. So again, we could go, and again, we have limited time, but it's there's lots of excitement here, and as we work with personalities. So key to this is think about what might be underneath it. Some of you may use a great coaching question when faced with sort of a complaint, and I got this from a great team coaching partner of mine. Her name's Sharon Miller, so I'll attribute it to Sharon, and maybe she got it somewhere else. But when we are in front of a team over the years, she's always said to the person who is argumentative or really gurring with complaints, what's your request? What's the request that you want to make? Maybe it's the request you want to make of me. Maybe it's the request you want to make of your team members. What's the request? And that automatically puts people in the driver's seat. It takes them off of the passive victim into this is your choice. What do you want to do about it? So I'll offer that up as yet a final tidbit. What's the request you want to make of your team? What's the request you want to make of me, if it's appropriate for me as a coach? So I hope this has sparked you. Again, I have never, in my experience, had all of these personalities show up at one time. The mitigating factor is developing those relationships in case anyone's thinking, oh my gosh, I don't want to do this work right now because there's just too many things that could happen. It's not hopefully all going to happen at once. So early on, I asked you tricky issues, anything as we go to wrap up in the next few minutes, any other tricky issues that people are concerned about that I might be able to direct some resources towards? All right. So want to do a bit of a plug. Again, if this is the first time you've joined me for one of these calls, thanks for joining me. I talked a little bit about the books that I've written over the years. You can connect with me on Facebook. Effective Group Coaching is our Facebook page. Every week I try to do a from one to many tip. I also make sure that we have some resource links to the daily blog. Blog, of course, is groupcoaching.blogspot.com. groupcoaching.blogspot.com. And if you click on over to there, you're going to find 11 years of writing. So some good questions. Jackie sent one. I'm going to just put this in here. Jackie had requested, how about a few more tips for drawing out introverts? Great question. And I don't know if it's drawing out introverts as much as it's giving everyone a voice. I have a real affinity for a couple of different resources. In fact, when Jackie, there's another Jackie on the line, one of the resources I bring into a lot of my work are photo cards. So a couple of years ago, I created the Conversation Sparker cards. These are 72 photo cards, which include 22 question cards. So one's like, what do you want to celebrate? What's your priority? What else? The nice thing about using photo cards is it gives people a different stimulus to connect with. And so whether it's because they're more introverted or they need more processing time, these are different styles, it gives people just a different option. We're not all verbal, you know, not all of us love the barrage of a verbal dialogue. So we want to use photo cards. And I was saying to Jackie that as of yesterday, we now have them available en français. So anyone who facilitates in French, we've translated that into French. Spanish, Espanol is next, and then Portuguese. So there will be available in lots of different languages. As a sidebar, though, another great strategy, again, you can use your Post-it tools, giving people time for Post-its to actually write down and share their verbiage, their insights. Another final strategy that I use if I notice people are a lot more reserved for whatever reason, smaller group work, paired work, smaller group work. So people may be more comfortable in that respect. So Jackie, was that useful? And you can just put it back to chat. Jackie shared that with us in the chat function, which is nice. Thank you. That's good. I'm glad you got that. This fall, we have a number of different programs coming up, including a couple launching this week. So this Thursday, I run the Group Coaching Essentials program. It's a 5-week teleseminar. We're meeting this month, starting this week for 5 weeks on Thursdays from 12 to 1:15 p.m. Eastern. If you've liked today's call, which is really tips rich, that's sort of my style. We go through the best practices of designing, implementing, and marketing group coaching in the Group Coaching Essentials program. Some coaches follow on with the Advanced Group Coaching Practicum. So if anyone's looking for more practice and confidence in doing this work, that is the course for you. That's the Advanced Group and Team Coaching Practicum. And in that course, we focus on both group and team coaching. That meets on Fridays. We started a few weeks ago, but if you did want to jump in, our second call is only this Friday afternoon at 1:15 Eastern. And we also have a 2-day program. I'll be doing a 2-day group and team coaching intensive here in Toronto, 19 CCEs with the ICF. So if you're a credentialed coach and you need your renewal credits, note that of the 19 CCEs, 17 of them are core coaching competencies. If you're just interested in this work, Fridays at 8 a.m., I run the Learning Lab and Design Studio, which is more of a monthly, I would call it a monthly or semi-monthly membership group. People drop in, we look at different topics. This month we're looking at kicking off programs. So 1 call a month is focused on a lecture. 1 a month is a facilitation lab where we actually get our hands dirty. And a 3rd group call each month is Coach on Call, when I'm here to answer people's questions and do some real-time coaching. So I hope that you've enjoyed today's call. One more question is, I think, just come in. I'm just going to check the chat. What other platforms outside of Zoom or Skype do you recommend for group conference calls? Great question. So until about 6 months ago, most of my programming was still by phone. I still have groups that are phone-based only. And so you can use many of the different great free conferencing services. I have accounts with Free Conference, I want to say freeconferencing.com, freeconferencecalling.com, freeconferencecall.com. What was interesting this summer, when I was working remote myself up in Muskoka, I could not access any of my bridge lines. The phone service providers on my mobile, on my landline, blocked those lines. So I moved everything this summer all over to Zoom. The nice thing about Zoom is they're local dial-in numbers. So like many of you have joined us today, you're streaming, no cost to people. People can also dial into a local dial-in number, and there are international numbers available. I think for international callers, Zoom is even stronger than Skype. Skype, you have a little bit more thresholds in terms of how many people you can have on the line. Today we're using a pro Zoom call, so there is a free version. In the free version, you can only do a call for 45 minutes. In the pro version, you have huge amount of room, and the nice thing about it is you can also do virtual breakouts. We could have experienced breakouts on today's call as well. So that's why I've moved most of my work now to Zoom, or some groups are still on the phone because of firewall issues, etc., connectivity. But even with Zoom, a lot of corporate firewalls somehow seem to be able to get around it. WebEx and Abode Connect, some coaches are using those. I try to avoid those because many of the clients I work with are suffering from death by conference call. And as soon as we're on WebEx, they go into that mindset. It's not different enough of an environment for them to say, oh, this is a coaching call, not my multitasking conference call when I'm just going to do 4 things at once. So we use what we can. And I'd be happy. I will probably do some calls in 2017 on virtual facilitation. As you would have noticed, I also offer now a virtual train-the-trainer series of programs. That's called the Virtual Facilitation Skills Intensive. And we're going to start a group later this week, but we're also going to be starting a shorter program in the winter session. So stay tuned for that. Lots coming. So with that, stay in touch. I didn't include my email address, but if people have questions, info@potentialsrealized.com. Potentialsrealized.com is my main business umbrella. All of our leadership programming is under potentialsrealized.com. Groupcoachingessentials.com is where you'll find the coaching stuff. So with that, thanks for your time today. I'd love to sort of close out with anyone who has been on the call just sharing, what did you enjoy? What's the one takeaway that you're leaving this call with? And you can either chat on that. Okay, so what's the takeaway that you're leaving this call with? Either chat on it, and you'll find your chat function, top upper bar, lower bar as well, depending on your platform. Or if anyone would like to verbally say what their takeaway was, that would be just a nice way to close off on our call today. So you've invested your time. Jackie, I see you off. You were the first one on today. Would you like to share what you're leaving the call with today?
I really enjoyed the whole part about the different personalities and learning of different ways. I love the question that your friend gave you. I think it was an amazing question, and I'm looking forward to using that. And kind of, I'm new at going into team coaching, so I'm also, even though I've done it once, I'm still anxious about what I might meet in the room or with people. So I'm very grateful for you putting this together, and it gives me a little bit more courage to move forward. Thank you.
My pleasure. And, I will say I do these quarterly calls. Next one will come up in mid-December. It'll be our 13th annual year-end group and team programs call. So do join me for that as well. Stay tuned. Again, if you tweet, Twitter feed is under Jen Britton, Jenn Britton. So Jackie, if I can read yours, Jackie Hunter, another Jackie. Jackie writes that I need to be aware that others will not feel safe immediately, which is different from me. Good perspective. I need to be aware that others will slowly build trust. Thanks for the insights. And thanks to you joining us today as well, Jackie. Anyone else would like to just share briefly what your takeaway is from today's call before we wrap up? All right, well, I'm sure there's lots to learn and continue in this. I'm going to do a plug for the ICF. As some of you may know, the ICF just had the Advance Conference on the science of coaching. Unfortunately, last minute, I had to cancel my flight because of a piece of glass in my foot, which is fine this week, but last week it wasn't fine to fly. There should be some really good buzz, I think, in terms of what's going on. I know Columbia University is also doing a conference next month. I'm going to be part of a panel of pioneers of team coaching. We're going to be talking about it. People like Marita Frijon, myself, Peter Hawkins. Some of you may have read Peter's book on leadership team coaching. And I also believe that David Clutterbuck is going to be part of our panel as well. David's book, Coaching the Team at Work, is another seminal reference. So thanks for joining us. I will be ending a recording now, and I will be making this available to the wider community at FromOneToMany.com, and want to wish you a great rest of the day. So take care, everyone. Have a great fall. We'll see you hopefully 3 months from now at our end of year call. Be well. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.